Maya's heart shattered when she recognized her beloved horse Spirit trembling in pain at the rodeo, his eyes locking with hers in a desperate plea that transcended their 10 years apart. The horrifying truth behind his transformation from majestic champion to broken animal would expose secrets that had already turned witnesses into corpses. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment on where you're watching from. Let's get started. The thunderous applause of the crowd echoed through the air as the announcer's voice boomed through the speakers. The annual rodeo in Silver Creek was always the highlight of the summer, drawing crowds from all neighboring towns and even some tourists who happened to be passing through. The smell of dust, hay, and excitement filled the arena as riders and their horses prepared for the main events. For many, it was a day of entertainment and thrill, but for others it was a day that would change everything. Among the spectators sat Maya Winters, a woman in her early 30s with sun-kissed skin and eyes that held a certain melancholy. 10 years had passed since she had last attended a rodeo, 10 years since she had left this life behind. The familiar sounds and smells brought back memories that she had tried so hard to suppress, but today, she found herself drawn back to this world for reasons she couldn't quite explain. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for our next competitor, Jackson Reed, riding Thunder. The announcer's enthusiastic voice drew Maya's attention to the arena, where a young man in his 20s, clad in a plaid shirt and worn jeans, was preparing to mount a magnificent black stallion. Maya's breath caught in her throat as she laid eyes on the horse. There was something hauntingly familiar about him. The way he held his head, the distinct white patch on his chest shaped like a crescent moon. No, it couldn't be. It had been 10 years. And yet, as Jackson mounted the horse, Maya noticed something that sent a chill down her spine. The stallion's eyes were filled with a pain that was all too familiar to her, a pain that spoke of years of suffering. His once proud stance now seemed forced, his movements strained as if every step caused him agony. "That's Spirit," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible above the crowd's excitement. "That's my Spirit." Before she could process the flood of emotions that washed over her, the gate swung open and the horse bolted into the arena with Jackson on his back. What was meant to be a display of skill and control quickly turned into a heart-wrenching spectacle. The stallion moved with an unnatural gait, his body tense with pain. Each jump, each turn seemed to cost him tremendous effort, and yet he pushed through, driven by the commands of his rider and the crack of the whip. Maya couldn't bear to watch. She knew that look in Spirit's eyes, the same look he had given her 10 years ago when she had been forced to sell him, a mix of betrayal and silent pleading. She had promised him back then that she would come back for him, a promise that life's cruel twists had prevented her from keeping. The crowd gasped as the horse suddenly faltered, almost throwing Jackson off. The young man regained his balance and forced the stallion to continue, seemingly oblivious to the animal's distress. Maya's heart raced as she watched Spirit struggle, his once fluid movements now mechanical and pained. Without thinking, Maya rose from her seat and rushed towards the edge of the arena. "Stop!" she cried out, her voice lost in the sea of cheers and music. "Please stop!" A security guard stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "Ma'am, you can't go in there. It's dangerous." "You don't understand," Maya pleaded, her eyes never leaving Spirit. "That horse is in pain. He needs help. Please, I know him." The guard looked at her skeptically but remained firm. "I'm sorry, but you'll have to return to your seat. The professionals know what they're doing." But they didn't. Maya could see that Spirit was on the verge of collapse, his legs trembling with exhaustion and pain. She had seen this before, had felt the same desperation watching another horse push beyond its limits until it was too late. History was repeating itself, and she was powerless to stop it. Suddenly, Spirit let out a heart-wrenching neigh and stumbled. Jackson, unprepared for the sudden movement, was thrown off, landing hard on the ground. The crowd gasped in unison, the cheerful atmosphere instantly replaced by concern. Spirit stood in the middle of the arena, his body shaking, his head hanging low. The pain was now evident to everyone. Maya seized the moment of confusion to slip past the guard and into the arena. She ran toward Spirit, ignoring the shouts from the staff and the announcer's attempts to calm the crowd. All she could see was her old friend suffering and alone. "Spirit," she called softly as she approached him, her hand outstretched. "It's me, Maya." The stallion's ears perked up at the sound of her voice, a flicker of recognition in his exhausted eyes. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as horse and human reconnected after a decade apart. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" Jackson had recovered from his fall and was now storming towards Maya, his face contorted with anger. "Get away from my horse." "He's not just your horse," Maya replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "His name is Spirit, and he used to be mine. Can't you see he's in pain?" Jackson scoffed, dismissing her words. "Look, lady, I don't know who you are, but this is Thunder, and he's fine. Just spooked by something, that's all." By now, a small crowd had gathered around them, including the rodeo's veterinarian, Dr. Miller, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. He approached Spirit cautiously, his experienced gaze assessing the stallion's condition. "She's right," Dr. Miller said after a brief examination. "This horse is in severe pain. Look at how he's favoring his left leg, the way he's breathing. Something's very wrong here." Jackson's confidence wavered slightly. "But I've had him for months, and he's been fine. A bit temperamental maybe, but nothing serious." "What you're calling temperamental is actually pain," Maya said, gently stroking Spirit's neck. The horse leaned into her touch, seeking comfort in the familiar gesture. "I'd recognize him anywhere. The crescent moon on his chest, the small scar above his right eye from when he got caught in a fence as a colt." Dr. Miller looked at Maya curiously. "You say you used to own this horse?" "Yes, his name is Spirit, not Thunder," Maya replied, her voice breaking slightly. "I raised him from a foal. He was the gentlest, most spirited horse you'd ever meet. I had to sell him 10 years ago when my father fell ill. I was told he was going to a good home, a family with children who would love him. I never imagined—" She trailed off, unable to complete the thought. "Well, I bought him fair and square from a dealer in Texas," Jackson interjected defensively. "Papers and all." "Papers can be forged, names can be changed," Dr. Miller pointed out. "But right now, what matters is getting this horse the care he needs. I'm going to have to insist that he be taken to the clinic immediately." The rodeo's manager, a burly man named Frank, had been listening to the exchange with growing concern. The last thing he needed was a scandal involving animal abuse at his event. "Jackson, let Dr. Miller take the horse. We'll sort this out later." Jackson reluctantly agreed, though his eyes narrowed as he looked at Maya. "This isn't over. That horse is my livelihood." As the staff prepared to transport Spirit to the clinic, Maya stayed by his side, whispering reassurances in his ear. The crowd had dispersed, the show continuing with the next event. But for Maya, the world had narrowed down to just her and Spirit. "I'm not leaving you again," she promised, resting her forehead against his. "Whatever it takes, I'm going to make this right." Dr. Miller approached her with a sympathetic smile. "You can ride with us to the clinic if you want. Something tells me your presence might help keep him calm." Maya nodded gratefully, her eyes never leaving Spirit. As they led him towards the transport trailer, she couldn't help but wonder what horrors he had endured in the decade since she had last seen him. One thing was certain: she was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The ride to the veterinary clinic was tense, with Spirit whinnying in distress every time the trailer hit a bump in the road. Maya sat beside him, her hand steady on his neck, whispering soothing words into his ear. Dr. Miller observed the pair with quiet interest, noting the undeniable bond between them. The horse responded to Maya's voice in a way that confirmed her story. This wasn't just any woman claiming a connection to an animal. This was a reunion of old friends. When they arrived at the clinic, a team was already waiting to help unload Spirit. The stallion was reluctant to leave the trailer, his eyes wide with fear. Maya stepped out first, calling to him gently, and only then did he cautiously make his way down the ramp, limping heavily, but following her lead. "He trusts you," Dr. Miller remarked as they guided Spirit into an examination room. "That's rare to see in a horse that's been through trauma." Maya's throat tightened. "What do you think happened to him?" Dr. Miller's expression darkened as he began his examination. "Let's find out." Over the next hour, the veterinarian conducted a thorough assessment, checking Spirit's legs, back, teeth, and eyes. He took X-rays and blood samples, his frown deepening with each discovery. Maya stood nearby, her heart breaking as she witnessed Spirit's discomfort, feeling every flinch and tremor as if it were her own pain. Finally, Dr. Miller stepped back, removing his gloves with a heavy sigh. "Maya, I don't know how to say this gently. Spirit has been severely neglected and abused." Though she had suspected as much, hearing the words spoken aloud made Maya's knees weak. She steadied herself against the wall. "How bad is it?" "He has multiple poorly healed fractures in his left front leg that were never properly treated. There's evidence of repeated use of harsh bits that have damaged his mouth. His back shows signs of carrying excessive weight for prolonged periods." Dr. Miller paused, his professional demeanor momentarily slipping to reveal genuine anger. "And there are marks consistent with electric prods and whips. Someone used cruel methods to force him to perform despite his injuries." Maya closed her eyes, trying to block the mental images his words conjured. "Will he recover?" "With proper care and time, his physical wounds can heal to some extent. But I'm concerned about the psychological trauma. Horses don't forget abuse easily." "I know," Maya whispered, remembering how gentle Spirit had once been, how eagerly he would greet her each morning, how they would race across open fields with nothing but joy between them. "But he recognized me. That has to count for something." Dr. Miller nodded thoughtfully. "It does. It's remarkable, actually, considering how long it's been. You might be exactly what he needs right now." As they spoke, the clinic door swung open, and Jackson stormed in, followed by an older man in an expensive suit whom Maya didn't recognize. The newcomer had salt and pepper hair and cold eyes that assessed the room with calculated precision. "There you are," Jackson said accusingly. "You had no right to take my horse." "Your horse?" Maya stepped forward, protective instinct flaring. "You don't even know his real name." "Thunder, Spirit, whatever. I have the papers right here." Jackson waved a folder. "Bought and paid for." The man in the suit placed a restraining hand on Jackson's arm. "Let me handle this." He extended his other hand to Dr. Miller. "Edward Harrison, attorney for Mr. Reed. I understand there's been a misunderstanding about the ownership of this animal." Dr. Miller didn't take the offered hand. "This isn't about ownership right now, Mr. Harrison. This horse has been severely abused and requires immediate medical attention. As the attending veterinarian, I have the authority to place him under protective custody until his condition stabilizes." Harrison's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm sure we can come to an arrangement. My client is willing to pay for any necessary treatment, provided the horse remains in his possession." "Absolutely not," Maya interjected. Spirit clearly isn't being properly cared for under his possession. Look at him. Harrison turned his cold gaze to Maya. And you are? Maya Winters. I raised Spirit from a foal. I was forced to sell him 10 years ago, but I never intended for him to end up like this. I see. And do you have any documentation to support your claim? Maya hesitated. No, not with me. Everything was handled through my father's estate after he passed. How convenient. Harrison's tone was dismissive. Without documentation, I'm afraid your emotional attachment is irrelevant from a legal standpoint. Dr. Miller stepped between them. Mr. Harrison, I don't care about the legal ownership dispute right now. What I care about is that this horse has multiple injuries consistent with long-term abuse. As a mandated reporter of animal cruelty, I'm obligated to contact the authorities. Harrison's smile faded. I wouldn't be too hasty, Doctor. My client purchased this horse in good faith. He can't be held responsible for any conditions that existed prior to his ownership. I've had Thunder for 8 months, Jackson added defensively. He was already a bit skittish when I got him. I just thought he needed a firm hand. Maya couldn't contain her fury any longer. A firm hand? Is that what you call using whips and spurs on an already injured animal? He's in pain every time you ride him. Jackson's face reddened. You don't know what you're talking about. I've put everything into training this horse for competition. He's my ticket to the national circuit. At what cost? Maya challenged. Look at him. Really look at him. He's suffering. For a brief moment, Jackson's confidence wavered as he glanced at Spirit, who stood trembling in the corner of the examination room, his once proud frame now hunched with pain and fear. But Harrison quickly stepped in again. Dr. Miller, we understand your concern, but this is a valuable competition horse. Mr. Reed has invested considerable resources in his training. Surely we can agree that the best course of action is to provide whatever treatment is necessary while respecting my client's legal rights. Dr. Miller crossed his arms. The best course of action is to do what's right for the horse. And right now that means rest, treatment, and no more riding until he's fully healed. If ever. If ever? Jackson's voice cracked slightly. What do you mean, if ever? I mean that some of these injuries are severe enough that this horse may never be sound enough for riding again. Certainly not for competitive rodeo events, Dr. Miller explained bluntly. Harrison placed a warning hand on Jackson's shoulder as the young man started to protest. We'll need a second opinion, of course. In the meantime, I must insist that no permanent decisions be made regarding this animal's future without our consultation. As the men argued, Maya moved to Spirit's side, stroking his neck gently. The stallion leaned into her touch, seeking comfort. In that moment, amid the raised voices and legal threats, Maya made a silent promise to herself and to Spirit. She would fight for him, no matter what it took. Gentlemen, she interrupted, her voice calm but resolute. While you debate ownership and legal rights, I'm going to do what no one has apparently done for Spirit in years. Make sure he's comfortable and not afraid. She turned to Dr. Miller. Is there somewhere quiet I can take him? The veterinarian nodded appreciatively. The back paddock is peaceful. I'll have one of my assistants show you the way. As Maya led Spirit out of the room, she could feel Harrison's calculating gaze following her. She knew this wasn't over. It was just beginning. And somewhere in the tangled web of ownership documents and sales records lay a truth that someone was desperate to keep hidden. The back paddock of Dr. Miller's clinic was a stark contrast to the dusty rodeo arena. Lush green grass grew in patches and a small shelter offered shade from the afternoon sun. Maya led Spirit slowly across the enclosure, giving him time to adjust to the new surroundings. His steps were hesitant, but he followed her willingly, his trust in her seemingly unbroken despite the years apart. There you go. she murmured as he lowered his head to sniff at the grass. "You're safe here." For a long time, Maya simply stood with him, her hand resting lightly on his back, feeling the gentle rise and fall of his breathing. Memories flooded back, teaching him to accept a saddle for the first time, the exhilarating feeling of their first gallop together, the quiet moments when she'd brush him while telling him about her day. Spirit had been more than just a horse to her. He had been a confidant, a friend during the tumultuous years of her adolescence. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, leaning her forehead against his neck. "I never should have let you go." Behind her, the gate to the paddock creaked open. Maya turned to see Dr. Miller approaching, his face grave. "How is he settling in?" the veterinarian asked, joining her beside Spirit. "As well as can be expected," Maya replied, watching as Spirit cautiously explored his new temporary home. "Has Jackson left?" Dr. Miller nodded. "For now." His attorney made it clear they'll be back with appropriate documentation to reclaim Thunder, or Spirit as you know him. They can't take him back, not after what they've done to him. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. Dr. Miller's voice was gentle but firm. If Jackson has legal ownership papers, it becomes a matter for animal control in the courts. The most we can do right now is document Spirit's condition thoroughly and file a report of suspected abuse. Maya felt a surge of frustration. So we just wait while they gather their paperwork and prepare their lies? There has to be something more we can do. Dr. Miller studied her for a moment. "You said you sold Spirit 10 years ago. Do you remember to whom?" "Not directly," Maya admitted. "My father handled the sale while I was away at college. He was ill, and we needed the money for his medical bills. All I know is that he told me Spirit was going to a family with children, somewhere he'd be loved and well cared for." "And your father? Could he provide any information?" Maya's expression clouded. "He passed away 8 years ago. All his records were lost in a house fire a year later. I've tried to track Spirit over the years, but the trail went cold." "I see." Dr. Miller considered this. "What about the original registration papers? Most purebreds have them." "Spirit is a quarter horse registered with the American Quarter Horse Association. I should still be listed as his original owner or breeder in their database." A flicker of hope crossed Dr. Miller's face. "That's a start. If we can trace his ownership chain through the AQHA records, we might find out how he ended up with Jackson and who mistreated him along the way." Maya nodded, determination replacing despair. "I'll contact them first thing tomorrow. In the meantime, is it all right if I stay with him tonight? I don't want him to be alone." "I thought you might ask that." Dr. Miller smiled. "I've already had my assistant prepare the small apartment above the clinic. It's not fancy, but it's comfortable enough for a few nights." "Thank you," Maya said, genuinely touched by his kindness. "For everything." After Dr. Miller left, Maya spent hours with Spirit, simply being present with him. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the paddock, she noticed how the stallion kept glancing toward the gate, as if expecting someone to enter, someone he feared. "No one's going to hurt you anymore," she promised, guiding him gently toward the shelter as evening approached. "I won't let them." That night, after ensuring Spirit was comfortable in his stall with fresh water and hay, Maya retreated to the small apartment above the clinic. It was indeed modest, just a bedroom, bathroom, and kitchenette, but it suited her needs. She was exhausted, but sleep eluded her as her mind raced with questions about Spirit's missing years. She rose early the next morning, just as dawn was breaking. From the window, she could see Spirit in his stall below, already awake and watching the door. Even injured and traumatized, he retained an alertness that had always been part of his character. After a quick shower and coffee, Maya headed downstairs to find Dr. Miller already at work. The clinic wouldn't open to regular patients for another hour, but he was reviewing Spirit's test results with a concerned expression. "Something wrong?" Maya asked, joining him at the desk. "His blood work shows elevated liver enzymes consistent with pain medication overuse," Dr. Miller explained, showing her the chart. "Someone's been giving him drugs to mask his pain so he could perform despite his injuries." Maya felt sick. That's criminal." "It is," Dr. Miller agreed grimly. "And it gets worse. I took another look at his x-rays this morning. That fracture in his left leg, it's been rebroken at least twice. Each time it healed improperly, creating more scar tissue and chronic pain." Maya leaned against the desk, trying to process the extent of the abuse. Who would do this? Who could be so cruel? "Unfortunately, it's more common than you'd think in some competitive circles. Anything for the win, regardless of the cost to the animal." Dr. Miller's voice held years of witnessing similar cases. "But this is one of the worst I've seen." A knock at the clinic door interrupted their conversation. Dr. Miller checked his watch, frowning. "We're not open yet." Through the glass door, Maya could see a man in his 60s standing outside. He wore jeans and a worn denim jacket, his weathered face partially hidden beneath a cowboy hat. He didn't look like a typical client bringing in a pet. Dr. Miller opened the door cautiously. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Maya Winters," the man said, his voice gravelly but gentle. "I heard she might be here." Maya stepped forward. "I'm Maya. Do I know you?" The man removed his hat, revealing thinning gray hair and kind blue eyes that crinkled at the corners. "No, ma'am. We've never met. My name's Ray Thompson. I used to work at Blackwater Ranch." The name sent a jolt through Maya. "Blackwater? I've never heard of it." "Not many have, and that's by design." Ray glanced around nervously. "Is there somewhere we can talk privately? What I've got to tell you about that horse of yours isn't for public knowledge. There are people who'd go to great lengths to keep it quiet." Dr. Miller exchanged a look with Maya, then gestured toward his office. "In here. We won't be disturbed." As they settled into the cramped office, Ray Thompson kept his hat in his hands, turning it nervously. "I've been working with horses all my life, Miss Winters, seen the good and the bad of how people treat them. But what happened at Blackwater?" He shook his head, his expression haunted. "That's why I came when I heard about what happened at the rodeo yesterday. That stallion of yours, he deserves justice. And you deserve to know the truth about where he's been." Maya leaned forward, her heart pounding. "Please, Mr. Thompson, tell me everything." Ray Thompson's weathered hands clutched his hat tightly as he gathered his thoughts. The small office felt even smaller with the weight of what he was about to reveal. "Blackwater Ranch isn't the kind of place you'd find on a tourist map," he began, his voice low and measured. "It's tucked away in the mountains, about 100 miles north of here. From the outside, it looks like any high-end breeding facility, pristine stables, manicured grounds, expensive horses. But that's just the front." Maya leaned forward, her stomach knotting with dread. "A front for what?" "A training operation unlike anything you've ever seen." Ray's eyes darkened with the memory. "The owner, Victor Caldwell, has connections in the rodeo circuit, racing world, and show jumping. He buys horses with potential, some legitimately, others through less savory means, and transforms them into winners no matter the cost." Dr. Miller frowned. "What do you mean by transforms?" "I mean they break them. Not just breaking them to saddle, they break their spirit." Ray's voice cracked slightly. "The methods they use, they're not natural, not humane. Caldwell believes that fear is the fastest way to control an animal. Pain is just a tool to him." Maya felt bile rising in her throat. "And spirit? My horse was there?" Ray nodded slowly. "About 8 years ago, a new horse arrived. a magnificent black quarter horse with a crescent moon on his chest. They called him Phantom because of how he moved, like a shadow in the night. But I recognized quality breeding when I saw it. This wasn't some backyard horse. He'd been properly raised, properly trained. "That's Spirit," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. "But how did he end up there? My father sold him to a family." Many of Caldwell's horses come through middlemen, dealers who buy from unsuspecting folks and then flip the horses for profit. Your Spirit likely changed hands several times before reaching Blackwater. Ray paused, visibly troubled by what he had to say next. When he arrived, he was still gentle, still trusting. That made him a challenge in Caldwell's eyes. He said the horse had too much spirit. The irony of the word choice wasn't lost on Maya. What did they do to him? At first, they tried conventional methods, long hours under saddle, demanding training sessions, but your horse, he was smart. He learned quickly but remained kind. Caldwell saw that as weakness. Ray took a deep breath. That's when things turned ugly. They started using methods that no respectable trainer would ever employ. Harsh bits, tight nose bands, spurs that would leave marks. When Spirit resisted, they'd withhold food, leave him isolated for days. Maya closed her eyes, trying to block the mental images, but Ray continued, his voice flat, as if the only way he could tell this story was to distance himself from the emotion of it. The breaking point came during a training session with Caldwell himself. Spirit refused a jump that was set too high for his experience level, a reasonable refusal that any good trainer would have respected. But Caldwell, he took it personally. He pushed that horse beyond endurance, and when Spirit finally bucked him off in self-preservation, Caldwell ordered what they called special training. "What does that mean?" Dr. Miller asked, though his grim expression suggested he already knew. They tied him in the round pen for hours under the hot sun. No water, no shade. Then they'd run him to exhaustion, and if he slowed, they'd use the whip. They'd do this day after day until he learned that rest only came with absolute compliance. Ray shook his head, disgust evident in every line of his face. "I've worked with horses for 40 years, and I've never seen anything like it. It wasn't training, it was torture." Maya felt tears streaming down her face, but she made no move to wipe them away. "Why didn't anyone stop this? Report them?" Caldwell is powerful in these parts. His money reaches far, and he's careful about who he hires. Most of the workers are undocumented, people who can't go to the authorities without risking deportation, and those who could speak up. Ray looked down at his gnarled hands. "Well, let's just say Caldwell makes it clear what happens to troublemakers." "But you're here now," Dr. Miller pointed out. "You're speaking up." Ray nodded slowly. "I'm dying, Doc. Cancer. Got maybe 6 months left. Figured if I'm going to meet my maker soon, I'd better clean my conscience while I can." He turned to Maya, his eyes pleading for understanding. "I tried to help the animals where I could. Extra feed, loosening the restraints when no one was looking. But I was a coward. I should have done more." Maya reached across the desk and placed her hand over Ray's. "You're doing something now. That counts for something." "There's more you need to know," Ray continued. "About a year after Spirit arrived, he injured his leg during a forced training session. Any decent owner would have given him proper rest and treatment, but Caldwell couldn't afford to have an expensive horse sitting idle. So they patched him up just enough to keep him working. Pain medication, tight wraps to mask the swelling, injections to numb the area temporarily." Dr. Miller nodded grimly. "That explains the improperly healed fractures and the liver damage from medication overuse. The injury made him less valuable for jumping or racing, so they transitioned him to rodeo events. That's when they started calling him Thunder instead of Phantom. New identity, new purpose." Ray's voice grew quieter. I left Blackwater about 6 months ago when my health took a turn. Last I heard, they'd sold him to a young rider looking to make his mark in the circuit. I'm guessing that's your Jackson Reed. Maya struggled to process everything she'd heard. The horror of what Spirit had endured was almost too much to bear. So Jackson might not know the full history? Maybe not the details, but he'd have to be blind not to see that horse was suffering, Ray replied. Caldwell's smart about covering his tracks. The sale would have seemed legitimate, proper paperwork, plausible backstory, but anyone who knows horses would recognize the signs of abuse. This Victor Caldwell, Dr. Miller said, his professional demeanor giving way to barely contained anger. He needs to be stopped. Ray's laugh was hollow. Many have tried. None have succeeded. He's untouchable, connected to judges, law enforcement, even government officials who look the other way. Money talks in this world, Doc. I don't care how powerful he is, Maya stated, a new determination hardening her voice. He hurt Spirit. He's probably hurting other horses right now. I won't let him get away with it. Ray studied her face, seeming to measure her resolve. It won't be easy. Caldwell doesn't like loose ends, and if he finds out you're digging into his business, he'll come after you. He's got resources you can't imagine. So do I, Maya replied, surprising herself with her own conviction. I have the truth, and I have people who care. She glanced at Dr. Miller, who nodded in solidarity. Ray placed his hat back on his head and stood up slowly, his movements betraying his age and illness. Then you'll need evidence. Proof that can't be ignored or buried. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. I may have been a coward while I worked there, but I wasn't stupid. I kept records, photos, videos, dates, names, everything I could document without getting caught. He placed the flash drive on the desk, his hand trembling slightly. It might not be enough to bring down the whole operation, but it's a start, and it should help you prove where your horse came from and what was done to him. Maya stared at the small device, understanding the risk Ray had taken in collecting this information and bringing it to her. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Ray warned, moving toward the door. Once you go down this road, there's no turning back. Caldwell will know someone talked, and he'll come looking. You'd best be prepared for what follows. After Ray Thompson left, a heavy silence filled Dr. Miller's office. Maya stared at the flash drive on the desk, a small object that contained evidence of unspeakable cruelty. Part of her wanted to view its contents immediately, to know exactly what had happened to Spirit during those lost years. Another part dreaded what she might see, images that could never be unseen, truths that could never be unknown. You don't have to do this alone, Dr. Miller said, breaking the silence. Whatever's on that drive, whatever comes next, I'm with you. Maya looked up at him, grateful for his support, but aware of the risk he was taking. This could get complicated, dangerous even. You heard what Ray said about Caldwell. I became a veterinarian to help animals, he replied firmly. Sometimes that means standing up to the people who hurt them, no matter how powerful they might be. With a deep breath, Maya picked up the flash drive. Let's see what we're dealing with. Dr. Miller connected the drive to his computer, and together they began to examine its contents. The files were meticulously organized by date, each folder containing photos, videos, and written notes. Ray Thompson had been thorough in his documentation, capturing evidence of Blackwater Ranch's operations over several years. As they sifted through the material, the full extent of Victor Caldwell's cruelty became apparent. Images showed horses confined in small, dark stalls, some standing in their own waste. Videos documented training sessions that were nothing short of torture, horses forced to work despite obvious injuries, subjected to electric prods when they failed to comply, denied water during long hours under the hot sun, and then they found Spirit. He appeared in a video dated 7 years ago, shortly after his arrival at Blackwater. Even in the grainy footage, Maya could see that he was still the proud, spirited horse she had raised. His coat gleamed with health, his movements fluid and confident as a trainer led him around a pen. The next video, dated just 6 months later, showed a different animal altogether. Head low, eyes dull, his once confident stride now hesitant and fearful. "Oh, Spirit," Maya whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "What did they do to you?" Further files documented Spirit's training under Caldwell's regime. Maya forced herself to watch, knowing she needed to understand everything if she was going to fight for him. But when they reached a video showing Spirit's injury, the moment when his leg fractured during a jump he'd been forced to attempt repeatedly, she had to look away. "That's enough," Dr. Miller said gently, closing the file. "We've seen what we needed to see." Maya wiped her eyes, grief giving way to anger. "How do we stop this? How do we make sure Caldwell pays for what he's done?" "We need to be strategic," Dr. Miller cautioned. "Ray was right about one thing. Caldwell is powerful, and he won't go down easily. We need legal help, someone who specializes in animal welfare cases." "I know someone," Maya said, a plan beginning to form in her mind. "My college roommate, Lee Bennett. She's an attorney with the Animal Legal Defense Fund now. If anyone can help us navigate this, it's her." Dr. Miller nodded. "Good. But we also need to secure Spirit's immediate future. Jackson and his lawyer will be back, and they'll have paperwork showing legal ownership. Can we prove the sale was fraudulent? That the horse was obtained through illegal means?" "Possibly, but it will take time. In the meantime, we need to keep Spirit safe." Dr. Miller considered for a moment. "I can file an emergency petition for protective custody based on the evidence of abuse. That should buy us a few days at least." Maya stood up, her determination renewed. "I'll call Lee right away. And I think we should contact local law enforcement too. Someone outside Caldwell's sphere of influence, if possible." "The state police might be our best bet," Dr. Miller agreed. "Less chance of local connections interfering." For the next few hours, they worked methodically, making calls, copying evidence, and developing a strategy. Lee Bennett had agreed to take the case immediately, her voice hardening with professional anger when Maya described what they'd discovered. By early afternoon, a state police investigator was scheduled to meet them the following day, and Dr. Miller had filed the emergency petition for protective custody of Spirit. Throughout it all, Maya made sure to check on Spirit regularly. His physical condition remained stable. Dr. Miller had him on pain management medication and antibiotics for a secondary infection in his leg, but his emotional state was harder to gauge. Sometimes he would respond to Maya's presence with recognition, leaning into her touch and watching her movements with interest. Other times he would retreat into himself, standing motionless in a corner of his stall, his eyes fixed on nothing, as if he had transported himself somewhere far away. During one of these dissociative episodes, Maya sat quietly beside him, not touching, just being present. "I know you're in there somewhere," she murmured. "The Spirit I knew. The one who used to race the wind and nicker at my approach. He's still in there, underneath all this pain and fear, and I'm going to help you find him again." As the day progressed, news of the situation began to spread through the small community. By late afternoon, several reporters had gathered outside the clinic, eager for details about the alleged abuse case. Dr. Miller handled them with professional restraint, providing only the basic facts while making it clear that an investigation was underway. Meanwhile, Maya received an unexpected call from one of her former riding students, now grown and working as a manager at a reputable horse sanctuary 2 counties over. "I heard what happened," Alicia said, her concern evident even over the phone. "Is it true? Did you really find Spirit after all these years?" "It's true," Maya confirmed, "though I wish the circumstances were different." He's been through hell, Alicia. The sanctuary has space, Alicia offered without hesitation. Once he's cleared medically, we can take him. He'd have peace here, space to heal, and you could visit whenever you want. The offer brought fresh tears to Maya's eyes. That would be perfect. Thank you. But just as things seemed to be falling into place, Jackson Reed and his attorney returned, this time accompanied by a tall, imposing man in an expensive suit whom Maya had never seen before. Dr. Miller met them in the reception area while Maya watched from the hallway, out of sight but able to hear the conversation. Dr. Miller, Harrison began with false cordiality, we've returned with the proper documentation proving Mr. Reed's ownership of the horse known as Thunder. We expect to take possession immediately. I'm afraid that won't be possible, Dr. Miller replied calmly. I've filed for emergency protective custody pending an investigation into allegations of abuse. The horse will remain here until that process is complete. The tall stranger stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. Perhaps we haven't been properly introduced. I'm Victor Caldwell, and I believe you're holding property that can be traced back to my breeding operation. I have documentation showing that I sold this horse to Mr. Reed through proper channels, and I don't appreciate these unfounded accusations. Maya froze at the name, her heart pounding in her chest. Victor Caldwell, the man responsible for Spirit's suffering, was standing just feet away, his voice smooth and confident, without a trace of guilt for the pain he had caused. And in that moment, she knew the real battle was just beginning. Victor Caldwell stood in the reception area with the confident posture of a man accustomed to getting his way. His tailored suit, expensive watch, and perfectly manicured appearance spoke of wealth and influence, but it was his eyes that truly revealed his character, cold and calculating, assessing everyone and everything as if determining their value and use to him. Before Dr. Miller could respond, Maya stepped into the room, unable to remain hidden any longer. A strange calm had settled over her, the kind that comes when fear gives way to righteous anger. Mr. Caldwell, she said, her voice steadier than she expected. I'm Maya Winters. I raised Spirit from a foal before he was sold and eventually ended up at your facility. Caldwell turned toward her, his expression betraying only mild interest, as if she were a minor inconvenience rather than a threat. Ms. Winters, I understand you've made some accusations regarding one of my former horses. Not accusations. Facts. Maya held his gaze. I know what happened at Blackwater Ranch. I know what you did to Spirit and other horses in your care. A flicker of something, annoyance, concern, crossed Caldwell's face before his mask of civility returned. I run a professional training operation that produces champion horses. My methods are effective and entirely within industry standards. Is that what you call torture now? Effective methods? Maya's voice rose slightly, her composure beginning to crack. I've seen the evidence, Mr. Caldwell. The videos, the photos, the documentation of your training techniques. What you've done isn't just cruel, it's criminal. Harrison, Jackson's attorney, stepped forward with a placating gesture. Let's all take a step back. These are serious allegations being thrown around without proper context. We're simply here to reclaim Mr. Reed's legally purchased horse. Dr. Miller crossed his arms. As I said, that won't be happening today. The horse remains under protective custody pending investigation. Caldwell's smile didn't reach his eyes. An investigation based on what exactly? The word of a woman who abandoned her horse a decade ago and now suddenly wants him back? Or perhaps some questionable evidence from a disgruntled former employee? Maya felt a chill. How did he know about Ray already? The question must have shown on her face because Caldwell's smile widened slightly. Small communities talk, Ms. Winters. Word gets around. Ray Thompson has a complicated relationship with the truth. especially since his health began to decline. Whatever he's told you should be taken with a healthy dose of skepticism. The evidence speaks for itself, Maya replied, refusing to be intimidated. And it doesn't just come from Ray. Evidence can be manipulated, context can be misunderstood. Caldwell shrugged dismissively. But I didn't come here to debate. I came to resolve a simple business matter. He turned back to Dr. Miller. Doctor, I understand your concern for the animal's welfare. Perhaps we can come to an arrangement that satisfies everyone. I'm listening, Dr. Miller said cautiously. Jackson is a promising young rider, but perhaps he lacks the experience to handle a horse with special needs. Caldwell gestured graciously. I'm prepared to repurchase the horse from him at a premium and place him in my rehabilitation program for retired competition horses. He'll receive the best care, and this unfortunate situation can be put behind us. Maya couldn't believe his audacity. You want to take him back to Blackwater, after everything you've done to him? Ms. Winters, your emotional attachment is clouding your judgment, Caldwell said with exaggerated patience. My facility has state-of-the-art veterinary care and rehabilitation services. It would be in the horse's best interest. Absolutely not, Maya said firmly. Spirit is never going back to that place. Jackson, who had remained unusually quiet throughout the exchange, finally spoke up. Look, I just want what's best for Thunder, or Spirit, whatever his name is. If he's really been hurt that badly, maybe I shouldn't be riding him. He looked genuinely conflicted. His earlier bravado diminished. But I paid good money for him. I can't just walk away with nothing. Caldwell turned to Jackson with a paternal smile. Which is why my offer is more than generous. You'll make a tidy profit, and I'll ensure the horse gets proper care. Don't listen to him, Jackson, Maya urged. He's not concerned about Spirit's welfare. He just wants to make sure no one can testify about what happened at his ranch. Harrison placed a warning hand on Jackson's arm. Mr. Reed, I advise you not to make any decisions until we've reviewed all options. The horse remains legally yours, regardless of what's being alleged. The clinic door opened, and a woman in a crisp suit entered, her confident stride and sharp gaze immediately commanding attention. Maya recognized her instantly. Lee Bennett, her former roommate, and now an attorney with the Animal Legal Defense Fund. She hadn't expected Lee to arrive until tomorrow. I hope I'm not interrupting, Lee said, assessing the room with practiced ease. Lee Bennett representing Ms. Winters and the interests of the horse currently known as Thunder, previously Spirit. She extended a business card to Harrison, who took it with a slight frown. Perfect timing, Maya said, relief evident in her voice. Caldwell's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. Another complication, I see. I prefer to think of myself as a clarification, Lee replied smoothly. Dr. Miller, I've brought the emergency injunction from Judge Ramirez. It officially places the horse under protective custody for the next 30 days, during which time ownership claims can be properly investigated. She handed a document to Dr. Miller, who accepted it with visible relief. Lee then turned to Harrison. Your client is welcome to pursue his ownership claim through proper channels, but the horse will not be moved until this matter is resolved. Harrison examined the document with narrowed eyes. This is highly irregular. My client purchased this horse in good faith. Perhaps, Lee acknowledged, but good faith purchases of illegally obtained property don't always hold up in court. If your client is truly an innocent party in this situation, I'm sure we can work toward an equitable resolution. Caldwell's calm facade was beginning to crack. This is absurd. You have no evidence of any illegal activity, just the ramblings of a dying old man with a grudge. Actually, Lee said, her smile sharp, we have quite a bit more than that. The state police have opened an official investigation into operations at Blackwater Ranch based on credible evidence of animal cruelty. In fact, they're executing a search warrant as we speak. Maya watched as Caldwell's composed expression gave way to genuine alarm. For a brief moment, his mask slipped completely, revealing the cold, calculating man beneath the polished exterior. Then, just as quickly, he recovered. "This is harassment, plain and simple," he declared, straightening his jacket. "My attorneys will have this thrown out by morning. As for you, Ms. Winters..." He fixed Maya with a hard stare. "I'd be careful about the accusations you make. Defamation can be an expensive mistake." "Is that a threat, Mr. Caldwell?" Lee asked pleasantly. "Merely a friendly word of advice," he replied, but there was nothing friendly in his tone. "Good day, Dr. Miller. Mr. Reed will discuss our options outside." As Caldwell turned to leave, followed closely by Harrison and a confused-looking Jackson, Maya felt a mixture of triumph and trepidation. They had won this round, but Caldwell's parting look had made it clear this fight was far from over. When the door closed behind them, Lee turned to Maya with a grim smile. "Well, that went about as expected. Victor Caldwell is exactly the type I've faced before. Wealthy, connected, and used to operating above the law." "Thank you for coming so quickly," Maya said, embracing her friend. "I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow." "When you mentioned Caldwell's name, I knew time was of the essence," Lee explained. "I've been trying to build a case against him for years, but his victims usually disappear or get paid off before we can get anywhere. This time, we have both evidence and a witness willing to testify." The next 24 hours passed in a blur of activity. State police investigators arrived at the clinic to interview Maya, Dr. Miller, and review the evidence from Ray Thompson. They took detailed photographs of Spirit's injuries and collected samples for forensic analysis. Lee remained by Maya's side throughout the process, guiding her through the legal complexities and ensuring that everything was properly documented for the case they were building. By evening, news had arrived from the officers who had executed the search warrant at Blackwater Ranch. What they found had exceeded even their worst expectations. They discovered hidden areas of the facility that weren't shown during routine inspections, Lee explained as she, Maya, and Dr. Miller gathered in his office. Underground stables with horses in deplorable conditions, equipment consistent with the abuse documented in Ray's videos, and medication logs showing dangerous overuse of painkillers and performance enhancers. "Were they able to arrest Caldwell?" Maya asked, barely daring to hope. Lee's expression darkened. "Not yet. He wasn't on the property when they arrived, and now he seems to have vanished. His attorney claims he's on a scheduled business trip, but the timing is suspicious. They've issued a warrant for questioning, but until they find him..." "He's running," Dr. Miller concluded. "That's as good as an admission of guilt." "Perhaps," Lee cautioned. "But men like Caldwell rarely run in the traditional sense. More likely he's regrouping, calling in favors, preparing his counterattack. We need to be ready." Maya felt a chill at the thought. "What about the other horses at Blackwater?" Animal Control took custody of 28 horses, all showing signs of neglect or abuse. They're being distributed to various shelters and rehabilitation facilities in the region. Lee's expression softened slightly. "It's not justice yet, but at least they're safe now." After Lee left to prepare for the next day's legal proceedings, Maya returned to Spirit's stall. The stallion was resting comfortably, his pain managed by the medication Dr. Miller had prescribed. When Maya approached, he raised his head, his eyes clearer than they had been since their reunion. "Hey, big guy," she said softly, entering the stall and sitting on a small stool beside him. "It's been quite a day." Spirit nickered softly, a sound that transported Maya back to their days together on her family's small farm. It was the first time since their reunion that he had vocalized in such a familiar way. Progress, however small, was still progress. "You know," she continued, gently stroking his neck, I never stopped looking for you. Every black quarter horse I saw on the road, every classified ad for a horse that matched your description, I always checked, always hoped. I just never thought our reunion would be like this." Spirit shifted slightly, moving his head to rest against Maya's shoulder. The simple gesture of trust brought tears to her eyes. After everything he had endured, after all the cruelty he had suffered at human hands, he still remembered their bond, still found comfort in her presence. "We're going to make this right," she promised. "Caldwell will pay for what he did to you and the others, and then you'll never have to be afraid again." Maya stayed with Spirit until he dozed off, his breathing deep and even in sleep. Only then did she reluctantly leave to get some rest herself in the apartment above the clinic. But sleep eluded her as her mind raced with thoughts of Caldwell, of the other horses still unaccounted for, of the long road ahead. She was awakened just after dawn by a frantic call from Dr. Miller. "Maya, you need to get down here now," he said, his voice tense. "Someone broke into the clinic overnight." Heart pounding, Maya threw on clothes and raced downstairs. Police were already there, taking photographs and dusting for fingerprints. Dr. Miller stood in the reception area, his face pale with anger and concern. "Is Spirit okay?" Maya asked immediately, pushing past an officer toward the stables. "He's fine," Dr. Miller assured her, following quickly. "Whoever it was didn't get near the horses, but they ransacked my office, the filing cabinets, the computer, everything. In the office, drawers hung open, papers scattered across the floor. The computer had been tampered with, its casing removed and parts clearly missing. They took the hard drive," a police officer explained. "Very professional job. They knew exactly what they were looking for." The evidence, Maya realized with dawning horror. Ray's flash drive was connected to that computer. Dr. Miller shook his head. "I made copies, multiple copies. Lee has one, the state police have another, and I kept one in the safe that they didn't manage to crack." He lowered his voice. "But they didn't know that. This was meant to derail the investigation." "Caldwell," Maya whispered, the name itself now synonymous with threat. "Most likely," the officer agreed, "though proving it will be difficult. Whoever did this wore gloves, avoided the security cameras, and left no obvious traces. Like I said, professionals." A new fear gripped Maya. If they came here, they might go after Ray too. He's the key witness. "Already thought of that," Dr. Miller said. "I called Detective Santos as soon as I discovered the break-in. They're sending officers to check on Ray." But an hour later, they received grim news. Ray Thompson's modest apartment had been found empty, with signs of a hasty departure. Drawers left open, clothes missing, food left out on the counter. There was no sign of forced entry, but a neighbor reported seeing Ray leave with a duffel bag around midnight, accompanied by a man in a dark suit. "Was he taken against his will?" Maya asked Detective Santos, who had arrived to coordinate the investigation. "Hard to say," the detective replied. "No obvious signs of struggle, but given the circumstances." She left the implication hanging in the air. "We've put out an APB for Mr. Thompson. In the meantime, I'd advise both of you to be extremely careful. If Caldwell is behind this, he's escalating." The warning was unnecessary. Maya could feel the noose tightening around them, Caldwell's influence reaching out like tentacles to dismantle their case piece by piece. First the evidence, now their key witness. What would be next? Her fears were confirmed that afternoon when Lee called with troubling news. "The judge who granted our emergency injunction is suddenly recusing himself from the case," she reported, frustration evident in her voice. "Claims a previously undisclosed conflict of interest. The case is being reassigned and the new judge is Herbert Whitmore." "Is that bad?" Maya asked, though she already knew the answer from Lee's tone. "Very. Whitmore has a history of ruling in favor of agricultural and equestrian businesses and animal welfare cases. And, this is the kicker, he was a guest at a Blackwater Ranch charity event last year. There are photos of him and Caldwell together. Maya felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Can we challenge the assignment? I'm trying, but it's a long shot, Lee admitted. Caldwell is pulling strings I didn't even know existed. He's desperate to shut this down before it gains any more traction. After hanging up, Maya went straight to Spirit's stall, needing the comfort of his presence. The stallion seemed to sense her distress, gently nuzzling her shoulder as she leaned against him. "They're coming for you," she whispered, wrapping her arms around his neck. "And I don't know if I'm strong enough to stop them." As if in answer, Spirit lifted his head and looked directly into her eyes, a spark of his old spirit visible through the veil of trauma. In that moment, Maya understood. This wasn't just about bringing Caldwell to justice anymore. It was about proving that even the most broken souls could heal, that cruelty could be overcome by compassion, that bonds of love could survive even the darkest circumstances. For Spirit, she would find the strength to face whatever came next. Judge Whitmore scheduled the hearing regarding Spirit's custody for the following Monday, giving them just 4 days to prepare. It was an unusually rushed timeline, another sign that Caldwell's influence was at work behind the scenes. While Lee fought the legal battle, Maya focused on Spirit's recovery, spending every possible moment with him. Each day brought small improvements. He was more responsive to her voice, less startled by sudden movements, and his appetite had improved slightly. Dr. Miller's prognosis remained guarded. Physically, he's stabilizing. The antibiotics are controlling the infection in his leg, and the pain management is helping. But these old injuries... Maya, you need to understand that he'll never be the horse he once was. The damage is too extensive. I know, Maya acknowledged, watching Spirit doze in his stall. I'm not trying to get back what we lost. I just want him to have peace for whatever time he has left. Security at the clinic had been enhanced, with cameras installed at all entrances and a private security guard patrolling at night. Detective Santos had also arranged for regular police drive-bys. But despite these precautions, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that they were all just waiting for Caldwell's next move. It came in an unexpected form. Late Thursday afternoon, as Maya was finishing Spirit's physical therapy session, gentle stretches and controlled walking that Dr. Miller had designed to help maintain mobility without causing pain, a familiar truck pulled into the clinic's parking lot. Jackson Reed stepped out, alone this time, without his attorney or Caldwell in tow. Maya tensed as he approached the paddock, but something about his demeanor seemed different, less aggressive, more uncertain. "Hey," he called softly, stopping at the fence. "Can we talk?" Maya patted Spirit's neck reassuringly before walking over to Jackson. "What do you want?" "I've been thinking a lot about everything," he began, his usual bravado absent. "About Thunder, I mean Spirit, and what you said about how he was treated." He ran a hand through his hair, clearly uncomfortable. "I never knew, I swear. When I bought him, they told me he was just high-strung, needed a firm hand. I thought I was helping him, training him properly." Maya studied him, searching for signs of deception, but finding only genuine regret. "You never questioned why he was in pain, why he flinched at every touch." Jackson looked down, shame coloring his features. "I was taught that's just how some horses are. My dad always said, 'Make him respect you, boy. Show him who's boss.' I never thought to question it." His admission wasn't particularly surprising. Maya had seen it before. The cycle of abuse passed down through generations of riders and trainers, each one believing they were doing things the traditional way, never stopping to consider the suffering they were causing. "Why are you here, Jackson?" she asked, not unkindly. "I want to help," he said simply. Caldwell called me yesterday, offered to double what I paid for Spy, for the horse if I'd drop my claim and publicly support him. Said I should tell everyone that you're just a crazy horse lady trying to steal my property. Maya's heart sank. Another move in Caldwell's chess game. And what did you tell him? Nothing yet. But I've been doing some research on him, on Blackwater Ranch. Found some online forums where people talk about what really goes on there. Former employees, buyers who got horses that were damaged. He looked over at Spirit, genuine sorrow in his eyes. I never wanted to hurt him. I just wanted to win. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Maya felt a glimmer of hope. An unexpected ally could make all the difference. Caldwell is dangerous, Jackson. He's already broken into the clinic trying to destroy evidence, and our witness has disappeared. I know, Jackson nodded. That's part of why I'm here. I'm not the only one he sold horses to. I've been talking to other riders, people who bought from Blackwater in the last few years. Some of them have stories similar to mine. Horses with mysterious injuries, behavior problems that appeared out of nowhere. A few are willing to come forward to testify about the condition of the horses they received. This was more than Maya had dared hope for. That would be incredibly helpful, but are they aware of the risks? Caldwell isn't going to just sit back and let this happen. They know, Jackson assured her. But here's the thing about rodeo folks. Once we figure out someone's been dishonest with us, there's no going back. It's a matter of principle. As they continued talking, a sleek black car pulled into the parking lot. Maya instantly recognized Victor Caldwell as he emerged, his face set in a mask of controlled anger when he spotted Jackson talking to her. "Looks like your decision just got made for you," Maya murmured as Caldwell strode toward them. "Mr. Reed," Caldwell called, his voice deceptively pleasant. "I've been trying to reach you. I see you found more interesting company." Jackson straightened, squaring his shoulders. "Just getting some facts straight, Mr. Caldwell." "Facts can be such troublesome things," Caldwell replied with a thin smile, "especially when they're misrepresented by those with an agenda." He glanced dismissively at Maya before focusing again on Jackson. "Have you considered my offer?" "I have," Jackson said, a new confidence in his voice. "And I'm declining. In fact, I'm withdrawing my claim to Spirit entirely. He belongs with Ms. Winters." Caldwell's smile vanished. "That would be a foolish decision, Mr. Reed. Very foolish indeed. Your career is just beginning. It would be a shame to see it end before it truly starts." The threat hung in the air, naked and ugly. But Jackson didn't flinch. "Is that what happened to Ray Thompson when he wouldn't play along? When he started keeping records of what really happens at Blackwater?" A flash of genuine surprise crossed Caldwell's face before he composed himself. "I have no idea what you're implying. Mr. Thompson is a troubled individual with a personal vendetta against me. Nothing more." "Then where is he?" Maya challenged. "He disappeared right after evidence was stolen from the clinic. That's quite a coincidence." "I'm not responsible for the comings and goings of former employees," Caldwell replied coldly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, Mr. Reed and I have business to discuss." "No, we don't," Jackson stated firmly. "We're done. And on Monday I'll be telling Judge Whitmore exactly what I know about Spirit's condition when I bought him, and how your people instructed me to keep using him despite his obvious pain." For a moment Caldwell seemed at a loss for words, his carefully constructed facade cracking to reveal the fury beneath. Then, with visible effort, he regained his composure. "You're making a terrible mistake," he said quietly. "All of you. This isn't over." With that, he turned and walked back to his car, his movements stiff with barely controlled rage. As the black car pulled away, Maya released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you," she said to Jackson. I know that wasn't easy. It was easier than living with myself if I'd taken his money, Jackson replied. Besides, I owe Spirit that much. I should have seen the signs, should have known something was wrong. Before Maya could respond, her phone rang, Lee with news from the investigation. They found Ray Thompson, Lee said without preamble, her voice tight with emotion. Maya's heart leapt. That's great. Is he okay? No, Maya, he's not. Lee's voice softened with genuine regret. They found his body in a motel room outside of Carson City. The police are calling it a suicide, but we know better, Maya finished, the words bitter in her mouth. Caldwell got to him. It looks that way, though proving it will be nearly impossible. He left a note renouncing his previous statements about Blackwater, claiming he made everything up out of spite. Lee sighed heavily. This complicates things significantly. As Maya hung up and shared the devastating news with Jackson, she looked over at Spirit, who was watching them intently from the paddock. In his eyes, she saw not just pain and fear, but a silent plea that made her resolve harden like steel. Ray Thompson had died trying to expose the truth. She wouldn't let his death be in vain. The weekend passed in a haze of preparation for Monday's hearing. Ray Thompson's death had cast a dark shadow over their case, but Lee worked tirelessly to salvage what she could. Jackson proved to be a valuable ally, reaching out to his contacts in the rodeo community and gathering statements from others who had purchased horses from Blackwater Ranch. By Sunday evening, they had testimonies from 5 different riders, all describing similar patterns of hidden injuries and behavioral issues in horses obtained through Caldwell. But the most significant development came from an unexpected source. Detective Santos arrived at the clinic late Sunday afternoon with a thin manila envelope. We executed another search warrant at Blackwater, this time focusing on the business records, she explained, spreading the contents of the envelope on Dr. Miller's desk. Most of the documents had been recently shredded, but we recovered these from a hidden safe in Caldwell's office. The papers detailed a complex network of shell companies and middlemen used to obscure the horses' origins and medical histories. Among them was a transaction record for a black quarter horse with the registered name Winter Spirit, sold by the estate of Thomas Winters, Maya's father, 10 years earlier. This proves Spirit was your horse, Detective Santos said, pointing to the document. And more importantly, it shows a clear paper trail of how he ended up at Blackwater through 3 different intermediaries, each changing his name and falsifying his health records. Maya traced her father's signature on the original bill of sale, her throat tight with emotion. He never would have sold Spirit if he'd known where he would end up. The pattern is the same for at least a dozen other horses, the detective continued. Caldwell used these middlemen to acquire promising horses from unsuspecting owners, then retrained them using his methods before selling them to competitors at premium prices. This is exactly what we need, Lee said, carefully examining each document. These records directly contradict the ownership papers Jackson received when he purchased Spirit. They prove fraud, which invalidates the subsequent sales. There's more, Detective Santos added grimly. The forensic analysis of Ray Thompson's death revealed inconsistencies with suicide. The angle of the gunshot, the lack of powder residue on his hands, and surveillance footage from the motel showing 2 men entering his room shortly before the estimated time of death. We're now investigating it as a potential homicide. Maya's blood ran cold. You think Caldwell had him killed? We can't prove that yet, the detective cautioned. But it's clear that Mr. Thompson didn't take his own life, despite the staged suicide note. Whoever did this was professional, careful, but they made mistakes. These developments strengthened their legal position, but they also escalated the danger. If Caldwell was willing to eliminate a witness, what else might he do to protect himself? Detective Santos seemed to read Maya's thoughts. We've stationed an officer outside the clinic, and another will remain with you until the hearing tomorrow. We're taking the threat seriously, Ms. Winters." After the detective left, Maya found herself unable to sleep, her mind racing with both hope and fear. Around midnight, she gave up trying and went downstairs to check on Spirit. The security guard nodded to her as she passed, his presence both reassuring and a stark reminder of the stakes involved. Spirit was awake, standing quietly in his stall. When Maya approached, he nickered softly, a sound that grew more frequent with each passing day, as if he were gradually remembering how to express happiness. "Big day tomorrow," she told him, stroking his neck. "The judge will decide where you belong. But no matter what happens in that courtroom, I promise you'll never go back to Blackwater. Never." Spirit pressed his muzzle against her shoulder, his breath warm against her skin. It was the most affectionate gesture he had offered since their reunion, and Maya took it as a good omen. Dawn broke clear and cool on Monday morning. Maya dressed carefully in a conservative blouse and slacks, wanting to present herself as the responsible horse owner she was. Dr. Miller had prepared a detailed medical report on Spirit's condition, complete with X-rays and photographs documenting his injuries. Jackson had arrived early, nervous but determined to testify about how he had been misled regarding Spirit's health and history. They were about to leave for the courthouse when Maya's phone rang, an unknown number. "Hello?" she answered cautiously. "Ms. Winters." Victor Caldwell's smooth voice sent an immediate chill down her spine. "I thought we should talk before things go any further." Maya motioned to Lee, who was nearby, and put the phone on speaker. "I have nothing to say to you, Mr. Caldwell. That's unfortunate because I have a proposition that might interest you." His tone was casual, as if they were discussing a minor business transaction rather than the aftermath of abuse and a suspicious death. "I'm prepared to drop all claims to the horse and make a substantial donation to an equine rehabilitation center of your choice. In return, you agree to stop pursuing these unfounded allegations against Blackwater Ranch." Lee shook her head vigorously, mouthing, "Don't engage," but Maya couldn't help herself. "You're offering me a bribe? After everything you've done?" "I'm offering a solution that benefits everyone, especially the horse you claim to care so much about." Caldwell's voice hardened slightly. "The alternative is far less pleasant. You may have gathered some compelling testimony, Ms. Winters, but I've weathered stronger storms than this. And when it's over, when you've exhausted your resources and your witnesses have reconsidered their positions, where will that leave your precious Spirit?" The threat was unmistakable. Even if they won today's hearing, Caldwell would continue fighting, dragging out the legal battle until they couldn't sustain it anymore. "Why are you doing this?" Maya asked, genuine bewilderment in her voice. "He's just one horse among many. Why go to such lengths to cover up what you did to him?" There was a pause, and when Caldwell spoke again, there was an edge to his voice that hadn't been there before. "Because I don't lose, Ms. Winters. Not to self-righteous crusaders, not to disloyal employees, not to anyone. Spirit, or Phantom as I called him, was to be my masterpiece, the perfect example of my training methods. His resistance was unexpected. Breaking him became a personal challenge." The casual cruelty of his words left Maya speechless. "So here's what's going to happen," Caldwell continued, clearly believing he had the upper hand. "Either you accept my generous offer and walk away with your horse and your conscience clear, or I will destroy everything and everyone involved in this little campaign of yours. Your choice." Before Maya could respond, Lee took the phone. "Mr. Caldwell, this is Lee Bennett, legal counsel for Ms. Winters. I should inform you that this call is being recorded and will be submitted as evidence in both the civil proceedings today and the ongoing criminal investigation into your activities. Would you care to elaborate on your threats, or shall we continue this discussion in court?" The line went dead immediately. "Well, that was illuminating," Lee said with grim satisfaction. "And incredibly stupid on his part. He's getting desperate." Maya wasn't so sure. The confidence in Caldwell's voice suggested he still had cards to play, resources they weren't aware of. But there was no turning back now. As they drove to the courthouse, Maya's thoughts returned to Spirit and the moment their eyes had met across the rodeo arena. That instant of recognition that had set everything in motion. Whatever happened today, that connection had been worth fighting for, worth any risk. "Ready?" Lee asked as they pulled into the courthouse parking lot. Maya took a deep breath, centering herself for the battle ahead. "Ready." The Silver Creek County Courthouse was an imposing structure of red brick and white columns, built in a time when justice was meant to look and feel substantial. Inside, the wood-paneled courtroom was already crowded when Maya and her team arrived. Local media had picked up the story, and several animal rights activists had gathered outside with signs demanding justice for abused horses. Judge Herbert Whitmore presided from the bench, his expression inscrutable as he reviewed the documents before him. Despite his rumored connections to Caldwell, he maintained a professional demeanor, giving no indication of bias as the proceedings began. Victor Caldwell sat at the respondents' table with Harrison and 2 additional attorneys, a show of legal force that made Maya's stomach tighten with anxiety. Caldwell himself appeared calm, almost bored, as if the outcome were a foregone conclusion in his favor. As the hearing began, Lee presented their case methodically, starting with the evidence of Spirit's original ownership and the fraudulent chain of sales that had brought him to Jackson Reed. Dr. Miller testified next, his clear, authoritative description of Spirit's injuries and their causes leaving a palpable tension in the courtroom. Photographs displayed on a large screen showed the stark reality of the damage done to Spirit's body, the improperly healed fractures, the scars from whips and spurs, the physical manifestations of prolonged suffering. When Jackson took the stand, his testimony was particularly damaging. He described in detail how Caldwell's representatives had coached him on managing Spirit's difficult temperament, providing medications to mask pain and techniques to force compliance despite obvious distress. "I was told that he was just stubborn, that he needed to learn who was boss," Jackson explained, genuine remorse in his voice. "But now I understand that what I interpreted as defiance was actually pain and fear. I was unknowingly continuing the abuse that began at Blackwater Ranch." Throughout these testimonies, Caldwell remained impassive, occasionally whispering to his attorneys, but showing no outward reaction to the accusations against him. His confidence was unnerving, making Maya wonder what strategy he had in reserve. She got her answer when Caldwell's lead attorney called their first witness, a distinguished-looking man introduced as Dr. James Morrison, a veterinary expert with impressive credentials. "Dr. Morrison," the attorney began, "you've examined the medical records and photographs of the horse in question. In your professional opinion, could these injuries have been caused by standard training practices rather than deliberate abuse?" "Absolutely," Dr. Morrison replied smoothly. "High-performance horses often sustain injuries similar to those described. Without witnessing the actual training methods used, it would be irresponsible to characterize them as abusive rather than simply rigorous." Lee's cross-examination revealed that Dr. Morrison had never personally examined Spirit, had received substantial consulting fees from businesses connected to Caldwell over the years, and had previously testified against animal welfare organizations in similar cases. But the damage was done. He had introduced doubt, suggesting that the line between legitimate training and abuse was subjective. The pattern continued with each of Caldwell's witnesses. A successful rodeo champion testified that firm handling was necessary for competition horses. A breeder suggested that some bloodlines were naturally more prone to physical and behavioral issues. A business associate of Caldwell's praised Blackwater Ranch's facilities and care standards, claiming to have visited multiple times and seen nothing concerning. By the time the final witness was called, Maya felt her hope fading. Caldwell's legal team had constructed a plausible alternative narrative, one where Spirit's condition was the result of bad luck, genetic predisposition, and the inherent risks of competitive riding, rather than systematic abuse. During a brief recess, Maya stepped outside for air, the weight of potential defeat pressing down on her. She had promised Spirit he would never return to Blackwater. But what if she couldn't keep that promise? As she stood on the courthouse steps, a car pulled up and an elderly man emerged with difficulty, leaning heavily on a cane. There was something familiar about him, though Maya couldn't immediately place him. He approached slowly, his eyes finding hers with purpose. "Ms. Winters?" he asked, his voice raspy but clear. "I'm Howard Mitchell. I believe you knew my son, Ray Thompson." Maya's breath caught. "You're Ray's father?" He nodded, grief evident in the lines of his face. "Ray called me the night before he died. He was scared, said he'd gotten mixed up in something dangerous but was doing the right thing finally. He told me if anything happened to him, I should look in his storage unit in Carson City." Howard reached into his pocket and withdrew a small device. He left this there, along with a letter explaining everything. It was another flash drive, identical to the one Ray had given them initially. "The police have the original evidence," Maya said, confused. "This isn't the same," Howard explained. "Ray said this was his insurance policy, something so damning he was afraid to share it until absolutely necessary. He said if Caldwell ever found out he had this, he'd be a dead man for sure." His voice broke. Guess he was right about that. Inside the sealed plastic bag containing the flash drive was a handwritten note in Ray's distinctive scrawl. "For Maya Winters, the truth about Victor Caldwell and Congressman Lawrence Davis." When the court reconvened, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Detective Santos had arrived with a forensic technician, and Lee had requested an emergency addition to their witness list. Judge Whitmore, despite visible reluctance, had granted the request after reviewing the new evidence privately in his chambers. His expression as he returned to the bench was markedly different, the mask of impartiality replaced by barely contained shock. "In light of this new evidence," Judge Whitmore announced, "I am recusing myself from this case due to a previously undisclosed conflict of interest. These proceedings will be transferred to Judge Rebecca Martinez and will resume tomorrow morning." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom as Caldwell leaned forward, alarm finally breaking through his composed exterior. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. My client has a right to know what this supposed new evidence entails." "Mr. Caldwell will be fully informed through proper channels," Judge Whitmore replied stiffly. "This court is adjourned." As they filed out of the courtroom, Maya turned to Lee in confusion. "What just happened?" "Ray's insurance policy," Lee explained quietly, guiding Maya toward a private conference room where Detective Santos waited. "It's not just about horse abuse anymore. The flash drive contains videos of Caldwell discussing bribes to multiple officials, including Congressman Davis and apparently Judge Whitmore himself. There's also financial documentation showing payments through offshore accounts." "That's why Whitmore looked like he'd seen a ghost," Maya realized. "Exactly. He's implicated, and he knows it. The case will now go to Judge Martinez, who has a reputation for being tough but fair, and more importantly, has no connections to Caldwell." Inside the conference room, Detective Santos was already on the phone, coordinating with federal authorities who were now involved due to the bribery allegations against a congressman. "Caldwell won't get far," she assured Maya. "We've got officers waiting to take him into custody as soon as he leaves the courthouse." But Victor Caldwell had vanished during the commotion following the adjournment, slipping away before the arrest could be made. An all-points bulletin was issued immediately, his assets frozen, his passport flagged. "He won't stay free for long," Detective Santos promised. "Men like him always leave a trail." The next morning, Judge Martinez heard the case from the beginning. Without Caldwell's intimidating presence and with the new evidence casting doubt on the credibility of his entire operation, the proceedings took on a different tone. By noon, she had issued her ruling. Spirit would be permanently placed in Maya's custody, with Jackson Reed relinquishing all claims in exchange for compensation from Caldwell's frozen assets. More importantly, Judge Martinez issued an injunction preventing Blackwater Ranch from conducting any further business pending a complete investigation and ordered all remaining horses on the property to be evaluated by independent veterinarians and placed in protective custody. It was a victory more complete than Maya had dared to hope for, though the satisfaction was tempered by the knowledge that Caldwell himself remained at large. 3 months later, Maya stood at the fence of a spacious paddock at Willow Creek Sanctuary, the rehabilitation facility run by her former student Alicia. Spirit grazed peacefully in the distance, his coat shining with renewed health in the autumn sunlight. He would never fully recover from his physical injuries. Dr. Miller had been right about that. But the fear in his eyes had gradually been replaced by something else. Trust, contentment, perhaps even joy. Alicia joined her at the fence, smiling as they watched Spirit interact with a gentle mare who had become his constant companion. "He's doing so well," she observed. "Yesterday he even initiated play with some of the younger horses. I never thought we'd see that." Maya nodded, throat tight with emotion. Every small victory in Spirit's recovery felt monumental. The first time he had approached her without hesitation, the day he had whinnied in greeting when she arrived, the moment he had willingly accepted a saddle pad on his back just to see if he could. "Any news about Caldwell?" Alicia asked, knowing how the question of justice unserved still weighed on Maya. "They found his yacht abandoned off the coast of Mexico last week," Maya replied. "They think he's somewhere in South America now, but the investigation is ongoing. The FBI has dismantled most of his network, though. And the congressional hearings about abuse in the competition horse industry are set to begin next month." The exposure of Caldwell's operation had sent shockwaves through the equestrian world, prompting calls for stricter regulations and oversight. Maya had been asked to testify before Congress about her experience to help shape new protections for competition horses. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was progress, a chance to ensure that what happened to Spirit wouldn't happen to others. A soft nickering drew their attention back to the paddock. Spirit had noticed them and was approaching at a leisurely pace, his gait still uneven, but his head held high. He reached the fence and extended his muzzle toward Maya, greeting her with the gentle familiarity that had become their new normal. "Hey, old friend," she murmured, stroking his face. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" In his eyes, Maya saw not just the reflection of who he had once been or the shadow of what he had endured, but something new emerging, a spirit not broken, but transformed, carrying the scars of the past, yet still capable of finding peace in the present. And in that quiet moment of connection, Maya understood that some bonds can never truly be broken, that even after the darkest chapter, a new story can begin, one written not in pain and fear, but in healing and hope.